Every 4 years, the World Cup unites billions of fans around the globe in a celebration of the planet's most popular sport. But when the host country has huge stadiums along with huge human rights abuses, where do you draw the line between sportsmanship and sports washing? The controversy surrounding this year's World Cup began more than a decade ago, when the organization behind the Cup, FIFA, first announced Qatar would be the host, prompting allegations of corruption, outrage over human rights abuses in the country that include the treatment of migrant workers who build the stadiums, 400 to 500 of whom Qatar officials have finally admitted died in the process after originally putting the number at just 3. Qatar is also known for its laws criminalizing homosexuality and the LGBTQ community, which many teams plan to protest with pride-themed armbands until FIFA banned them, both on the field and off. And it's not just Qatar. FIFA has also moved to block protests against Iran as the UN investigates the country's deadly crackdown on protesters, as many as 500 of whom have been killed over demonstrations prompted by the death of a 22-year-old woman, Mahsa Amini, who died in custody of the so-called morality police. Still, the games have gone on as scheduled with minimal pushback, full participation from every national team which qualified, including the U.S., which knocked Iran out of the competition today with a 1-0, I believe you call it, win. So where is the outrage and where should it be? As the Boston Globe's Marcela Garcia put it in her latest column, soccer, especially in the World Cup, has a way of inducing temporary amnesia about ethical dilemmas while summoning outsized nationalism. A lot of us suffer from that disease. She joins me now along with Peter Roby, former athletic director for Northeastern University. Peter, Marcela, good to see you both. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Marcela, did you watch today?
Yes, I did from my office.
Do you feel conflicted doing it or no?
No.
You're an honest woman. How about you, Peter? Did you watch?
Yeah, I watched the last part of it. I had been out earlier in the day, and so I watched the ending and was able to see the U.S. win.
So are we enabling, and I watched part of it too, so it's 3 for 3. Are we enabling bad behavior? I mean, the game the other day against England was the most watched soccer or football match in U.S. history. I'm sure today's numbers are even higher. Are we enablers, Peter, when we watch?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, the people have a passion for the sport and they have a right to watch it. You know, I think if anything, FIFA enabled by giving the bid to a country that has the kind of abuses and philosophies that they have about suppression and discrimination and oppression. And that's really more the issue. And FIFA, for all of its protestations about wanting equality and trying to do the right thing in terms of inclusiveness, you know, your values are on display with the kinds of decisions that you make. And this is one of those examples.
Well, they want their pocket stuff. We'll get back to FIFA in a minute. I want to spend another minute trying to move either of you on the individual, because I'm frankly much more torn than maybe you are. Peter, you're in your wonderful column, Marcela, you talk about the fact that you come from a country, Mexico, where there's wild excitement about this, including you, even though you've never been to a match. You acknowledge the human rights abuses, the treatment, mistreatment of migrant workers, on and on and on. You even admitted, sort of, that you bought your dog a Mexico jersey. So how do you deal with that? Do you just buy into that amnesia thing you wrote about and say, it is what it is, let them play the games?
I think the trade-off for me is that it makes me feel something. It's national pride. And maybe that's where you and I differ, because you're not a soccer fan. And even admittedly, I haven't been to a soccer match. I don't really care about soccer. I only care about soccer every 4 years. But it's because there's this national pride involved. I think to put it in an analogy that maybe Americans can understand, it's like the Olympics. People are watching how many gold medals the U.S. is winning all the time. And that's sort of like a national thing to do because it involves national pride in your country. And it's similar like this. So the trade-off is that, rooting for your team, for your sort of homeland, me as an immigrant in a country that doesn't really care that much about the sport, and it's a thing that unites all Mexicans. It really means something. And at the end of the day, to go back to Peter's point about FIFA, it really, and not to put the blame only on FIFA, but totally going to do that, because I don't think there's no one in the planet that would defend FIFA as an organization. It's one of the most corrupt international bodies in sports.
Well, there's some serious competition with the International Olympic Committee, which we'll get to.
True.
And I know we're going to get to FIFA and the IOC in a second. But Peter, I've known you for years, and much of your career has been talking about what are ethical responsibilities and behaviors of athletes themselves. We have the Iranian players who obviously lost today, who in their first match showed unimaginable courage by not singing the national anthem. Subsequent to that, their families back home were threatened with death or torture, and they did the understandable thing. But is there an obligation on athletes who come from countries that won't go home to that kind of thing to show support for the women of Iran, for example, or LGBTQ people in the host country, or does it all fall on the big boys, the FIFAs and the IOCs?
No, I think the players probably wanted to do more. I think their governing bodies probably restricted them from doing whatever, and the rules from FIFA around what was going to be allowed and what not was going to be allowed was probably on display. But you had players that were trying to wear the rainbow armbands and other things to personify their support for the LGBTQ community. And so, I think those were some attempts, but the players have worked 4 years to try to get to this point. It would be a huge sacrifice for people to ask them to do something that might put them at risk of not being able to participate. And so I get that. And that's why I come back to the governing bodies and their responsibilities.
Well, yeah, but one more thing about that. I understand. I think it was 7 Western European countries, the captains of those teams, Peter, were going to wear that One Love armband. And when they were threatened with a yellow warning, which I guess means if it turns out you get 2 of them, you get kicked out of the match, they backed off. But just look at our own team. U.S. Soccer itself, the institution, did that thing with the Iranian flag to show solidarity with the people of Iran, the protesters. And the coach of the team said, we have nothing to do with that. We just want to be here to play the game. What risk was the coach and the U.S. team at to stand side by side with U.S. Soccer and show some solidarity with the people of Iran?
Probably no risk that we would suggest, but how do we know what the conversations have been like behind the scenes with the governing bodies? And so, look, I think coaches at that point, every 4 years, it's the biggest stage. You're trying to prepare your team, and you want to try to minimize distraction. So they were prepared to do what they could under the circumstances. So you're right. I've spent my whole life trying to do and say the right things and make people aware of the things that are important. And I think that the responsibilities lie with other people in this case.
So let's go back to what you both said, Marcela. You talked about FIFA. I'm not even in agreement with you there, even though the FIFA through the years has shown such grotesque corruption, even though they've been acquitted on a number of criminal charges. It seems to me it falls to the democracies, particularly of the West. If the United States grouped together with its allies and said to the International Olympic Committee or FIFA in the case of World Cup, we're not going to places like Qatar, we're not going to China, we're not going to Russia, we're not going to places that are grotesque violators of human rights, the money dries up and the games don't happen. So don't we have more control than we let on?
We do, but it's in the opposite direction. I think people really want to watch the World Cup. And to Peter's point before, Iranian players probably wanted to play. They've been working hard to get here. It is a huge honor as athletes to be in the World Cup. And so I think that, again, the trade-off is, look, did you remember the Iranian who was prisoner, the Washington Post columnist, Jason
Rezaian? He's been on the show many times, sure.
He wrote an op-ed saying why he was supporting Iran in the World Cup. And so, again, it's this, I get the conflict, but the sport is so big around the world, and the fans are so invested in this international tournament every 4 years that I think, that's what makes. Look, Denmark and Germany were trying to boycott the World Cup, and it didn't happen. Why did you think it didn't happen? Because ultimately, I think the fans wanted their team to play in the World Cup, and Germany is one of the best teams.
They are. You know, Peter, I wasn't aware until a couple of days ago when I was reading about the awarding of the World Cup to Qatar, I think it was in 2010, that unlike a lot of the other Olympic decisions where the IOC says, hey, they don't put it quite this way, we have no choice but to go, let's say, to Russia because nobody else is in the bidding or those who were withdrew. My understanding is the U.S., South Korea, Japan was in the mix. Am I being naive when I say if the U.S. stood shoulder to shoulder with a bunch of other wealthy countries and said, we want it in South Korea, we want it in Japan, whatever it is, they'd carry the day, would they not?
I don't think so. You know, I think that there are so many countries around the world that care so deeply about football, as they say,
in
as
Europe.
they call it. Yeah,
the power is in Europe.
They would never allow the U.S. and its allies to kind of flex their muscle, if you will, on a sport that was late in coming to the U.S. Compared to some of the other countries that have been playing it for centuries. So, I hear what you're saying, but even with the television money that FIFA benefits from the U.S. Networks. My sense is that others would prevail in that situation. That's just my take on the type of complexity and the influence that other countries have when it comes to a sport like soccer or football, as they call it around the world.
I should say I have great respect for both of you. It appears I struck on every single count. So let me end with this, Marcela, if I can. How'd your dog look in the Mexico jersey?
Amazing. I posted a picture on Instagram, and he looked like he agreed because I think he knows he's Mexican American too.
Apparently,
he's a bilingual dog. He's a bilingual dog.
Marcela Garcia, Peter Roby, as always, I really appreciate your thoughts. Thanks so much, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
All the best.